Hello and welcome to the Federal. In continuing with our coverage of Trump visit to India, we're doing this live cast with Dr. Sridhar Krishnaswami, journalist, academician, and an expert in international relationship. Welcome, Dr. Sridhar Krishnaswamy, and thanks for being with us live. So what's your initial reaction, sir? How did you see
Pleasure
this
being
speech? Were things in expected lines? Is there anything different, or were there any surprises?
No, I think that for the most part, Mr. Trump is sticking with the US line, which is one of furthering relationship with India, which in effect means a lot to the Asia Pacific or the Indo-Pacific, as you may call it. I have not had the chance of reading the script in full, but I do see a lot of things that that Mr. Trump really has been talking about in the last several months of his presidency. And it should be of real interest to us in India when he is talking about the need to fight terrorism, the need to secure borders. These are some of the things in which the two countries have a lot of problems with. In fact, I don't have to tell the learned audience of the Federal as to what terrorism means to India, especially of that cross-border variety that we face almost on a daily basis. The US administrations over the years have been sensitized. They are aware of the problem. Just because every now and then they give Pakistan some slack, it does not mean that they are with Pakistan. But this is once again an opportunity for Mr. Modi and the Indian delegation to not harp on Pakistan continually for the next 2 days, but to take the opportunity to really drive home the point what the real problem is. And why is it that every time Mr. Imran Khan talks about resolution of Kashmir, that cannot be done until the issue of terrorism is also on the table, which Pakistan conveniently skirts. So that is my initial take on this, and I think the next 2 days or the next day and a half, there will be a variety of things for Mr. Trump and his delegation, and on the personal side for the First Lady, the First Daughter, and the son-in-law, to have hands-on experience as to what India is all about.
That's a very important point you made, and the observation today during the speech when President Trump specifically used the word Islamic terrorism, you could see the audience clapping, and then when he mentioned that he's going to work with Pakistan, we could see a sea of silence. So this part probably requires a bit of nuance to understand. So where is America in this? Because even last time President Trump openly said during the Howdy Modi that he would like to intermediate or negotiate, but India's position historically has been that Kashmir is essentially a bilateral issue between India and Kashmir. So do you think any resolution on this with an American influence, if you have to say, might not be exactly into our historical foreign policy? I mean, the post-Shimla Agreement foreign policy that we follow?
Yeah, that's a very important point that you have raised, Venkat. There's no doubt about it. Well, let me put it to you this way. Mr. Trump and the American delegation should have to be extremely naive to believe that India is going to allow a third-party mediation on Kashmir. It has historically been our position that it is a bilateral issue. It is not that we are averse to talking with Pakistan about Kashmir. But when we talk to Pakistan about Kashmir, we have to put terrorism also on the table. And it's very significant that Mr. Trump raised the subject of Islamic terror. Because let's put it this way, that's the only kind of terror that Americans have seen by way of 9/11, where a bunch of Islamic terrorists from a handful of countries in one clip killed about 3,000 American citizens. And so the America is still coming to terms with what happened on 9/11. They are still coming to terms, there's no doubt about it. And it will take a long time for those scars to heal. Now, when Mr. Trump says that he will talk to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, what in effect he should really be talking to the Prime Minister and also the military in Pakistan is that they have to somehow remove the global perception. Mind you, this is a global perception. It's just not an Indian perception.
Very true.
The global perception that Pakistan is the epicenter of international terrorism. There's no doubt about it. And almost every country in the world has come to accept that it's even privately, I'm sure, Pakistani leaders will definitely come to the conclusion that nurturing terrorists on their borders is detrimental to Pakistani national interests. There's no doubt about it. So here, it's not a question of Mr. Trump wanting to mediate. It's not going to happen. Nobody has ever tried it. Yeah, once or twice he says that he would like to get involved, but that's about it. Very recently, I think the UN Secretary General also said that he would like to get involved. But we are not going to fall for that. We are not going to fall for this pressure game. It's a time worn out argument. It's really time worn out for the Pakistani leaders to always push just to internationalize the Kashmir issue, which much of the world knows is a bilateral problem between India and Pakistan.
Another question, I'm sure as someone who has covered this for about 2-3 decades now, the Indo-US relationship, how do you see, I mean, historically we have always known most of this interaction are in what are known as closed door meetings. But here we are seeing the trend completely shift from closed door meetings to such open air, where there are public speeches and each talking about that. Do you see this sort of a diplomacy shift, where instead of what used to be talked behind doors is now being discussed in public? And a second part to that question would be, is this whole thing only about Trump and Modi interacting, or are there going to be teams at the back end who are going to be discussing various issues? Would really be curious to know your view on this.
I mean, it's interesting that you raised what you say as the changing atmospherics in these visits. That is, Mr. Modi going to Houston for a Howdy Modi gala, and Mr. Trump coming to a Namastey Trump. I don't think that takes away from the real meat of the substance, the real substance of the talks that are going to be held, tomorrow. That will be the real substantive part when the delegations get together, with the American delegation, which is indeed a high-profile delegation, and then the Indian delegation that will also be equally high-profile. The delegation to delegation talks will be very important. And then Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump will meet one-on-one. They don't need interpreters, I think. But sometimes they may even dispense with the note takers if they really want to have a private chat. And that is what we have to look for. because essentially, you have seen in the past, like for example, when Mr. George Bush met the Russian President Vladimir Putin, they took a walk. That symbolized more than just the two leaders wanting to talk to one another in private. So you cannot take the substance away from either the delegation meetings or the one-on-ones or any kind of a personal moment that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump are going to share over the next day and a half.
A last question. Mr. Trump is known to be saying that he's a very good deal maker, and although expectations for trade deal is low, but today he did talk about a defense deal of $3 billion. This was exactly before he started talking about terrorism. So at one side we have President Trump, who says he's a very good deal maker, and he actually did say that Modi was a tough negotiator. He actually said that publicly in his speech. But leaving aside this and actually trying to get into the details, do you really think we could, there seems to be already people taking it for granted that there's not going to be any deal. And at the other side, there are people from the American side who said, no, we should be working towards deal. So deal or no deal?
Good way of ending this nice conversation. We don't know. That's I would hesitate to wager a bet. Mr. Trump may say that he is a great deal maker, but let's put it this way: the kind of deal we are talking about, trade, is not about making a deal over real estate. Okay, it's a much more complicated issue. If Mr. Trump says that Mr. Modi is a tough negotiator, he is, for the simple reason that when it comes to the realm of dealing in agricultural, products, or bending down to American pressure on agricultural goods, we have a farmers' lobby here. 70% of India is agrarian. Don't forget that. So we have Mr. Modi has to take into account the interests of Indian farmers. Just because Mr. Trump wants us to buy chocolates and dairy products, we can't open the doors. We simply cannot open the doors. And the same goes for a whole list of other things like cheese for pizza, chicken wings. There are a lot of factors that go into it. Now, a lot of people before this visit were saying there's going to be no deal. And then somewhere along the way they said there's going to be a mini deal. I don't think Mr. Trump would want to finalize any kind of a deal, especially in an election year, because that raises him to be the target with the Democrats back home in November. For example, people are saying about dairy products, Harley Davidson, it all boils down to the state of Wisconsin. That Mr. Trump carried in a very narrow margin in 2016 votes, by about 25,000 votes. Yeah. Now, if if this deal is not seen favorably in Wisconsin, any kind of a deal that he strikes, then he stands to lose that state, which he wouldn't want to wager that kind of a battle. I don't think he would want to wager that kind of a deal, because basically he would like to sit back, relax, wait till the negotiators. Don't forget, politicians need not be good negotiators. You have to leave the nitty-gritty part of any deal only to the person who knows about it. And in this case, it is our ministers and bureaucrats who are very well adept at all these nuances. So there might be a few takeaways. I'm not saying there's going to be none. but not in the fashion that people are looking for a mega deal or even a deal of sorts.
Thank you very much for joining us in this live coverage, Dr. Sridhar. And over the next day or two, we're going to definitely keep troubling you a bit. And thank you so much for taking away time from your busy schedule to be a part of this live at the Federal. Thank you, and you're watching the Federal.
Thank you, Venkat. It was my pleasure, and you don't have to feel bad for disturbing me.
Thank you, Dr. Sridhar Krishnaswami. Thank you. You're watching the Federal. Continue to track Federal. We'll be giving you latest coverage of Trump's visit to India. He now is moving from Ahmedabad to Agra. There would be an evening at Agra at the Taj Mahal, and then with photo ops, of course, and then this continues. He then gets to Delhi tonight, and tomorrow is the big day, starting with the ceremonial function at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the talks through the day, and again ending the evening with a state dinner. Thank you very much. You're watching the Federal.